So where were we? Tmux, right, okay. So one of the first things you'll want to do is get Tmux working. I mentioned in class that it's really helpful to have your scrolling control from your trackpad or mouse accessible in Tmux. So one of the first things you'll want to do is, if you don't already have one, add a Tmux configuration file and add some stuff to it. So let's run a vim on, this is where your Tmux file should be located. And this very important option to turn the mouse control on. If you already have Tmux running, you have to kill the session, kill the Tmux server in order to have this option take effect. But I already have it running, so I can run Tmux, and then if you run a Tmux ls, it will show you what sessions you already have running. And it looks like I have already attached to it, which is true. I have in another console that I'm running. So let me just get out of that one. I'll run a Tmux ls again, and sure enough, it does not show attached. I was running it on a different computer. So let me go ahead and end Tmux attach, and that will attach itself to, really, if you only have one, it will just attach itself to that one. You can also specify which one to attach using some of the options. And in this particular instance, I'm resuming this Tmux session that I had running before. But let's go ahead and exit this so you can see start to finish what it looks like. We're starting from the Empire PS directory and going to run Empire, Empire, which will start up Empire. So you'll see that when it started, it indicated that it had some things already running. Let me scroll up a little bit, see if we can see that. This is that fancy trackpad scrolling. Loading the stagers, loading modules, loading listeners, starting listeners. So this is the kind of important part, starting these different listeners. I already have them configured. Empire will start them up for you if you already have them configured, which is really nice. But you guys don't have them set up yet, so let's do that together. Listeners, we'll get to the listeners menu and see that I already have two. And as sad as it is, because I have to recreate everything, including my stagers, let's go ahead and, well, yeah, I don't want to delete my stagers, so I will just create new ones and append different names to them with similar options, and then I'll leave these running. Yeah, that sounds better. So we're in the listeners menu, and we've got a bunch of options in the listener menu. But if you refer to the supplementary text, there is a walkthrough for creating these, and really it's not that straightforward creating these things. You kind of need some instruction as to where the options you need are buried. But in case you did look at the supplementary text, you should quite easily see that in order to create a listener, you use the useListener command. And my recommendation is to hit space, using Empire, hit space and hit tab to see the available options. Again, not that straightforward or user-friendly, but once you've used it just a little bit, you kind of get the hang of it. So in this particular instance, we're going to use an HTTP listener, and go ahead and hit enter. And we can get used to using the question mark here to give us an idea of what the commands are. So let's go ahead and type the info command to show us the options. So just real briefly on these options, some of the things you can do is with Empire is it has a bunch of different really neat options. Something in particular that's cool with this one is you can add your Slack token and get a notification from the listener that a new agent has checked in your Slack channel, which is pretty nice. So you don't have to be monitoring your Empire listener at all times, because quite frankly, you don't need to interact with Empire all the time to get functionality out of it. But the more important things that you'll be using are things like name. So let's go ahead and set the name, and it is case sensitive, but it does have tab autocomplete to confirm that you're setting the right one. And we'll set this name to HTTP new demo. Okay, so we'll run that and then run an info again, and we should see that change reflected right there. Sure enough, we do. Some of the other settings that I highly recommend setting are things like your cert path. I highly recommend having certs and using SSL for your stagers, for your listeners. It certainly improves the stealth capabilities of the stager and the agent, and it's also just generally good practice to use SSL on everything you can, or TLS. Okay, the other quite important thing is going to be your port. And for the stager I have set up, I already have one on port 4444, so I'm just going to change this to set port to 5555. And some of the other things you'll look at is the default profile. It's good practice to change this. A lot of signatures are built on the profile of your communication. So a lot of you are getting flagged by the GW network. I don't know exactly what their signature is looking for, but my expectation is that there is a signature in there looking for clear text requests to some host / admin login, whatever the default options are here. So I certainly suggest, especially if your intent is stealth, to change this. And yours might actually be different from mine. I think I've already changed mine to be different from the default options. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are different. And we'll see why this says what it does. If you'll notice that they're all prefaced with admin in this instance. We'll see why in a second. Okay, so that all looks good. I'm going to run an info again and see that it has taken the new port, and we can run a question mark and see that in order to execute the given listener, we just type execute. And sure enough, the listener has successfully started. So if we run a listeners, we should see our new one called HTTP new demo, sure enough. I'm going to check out these guys, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one because, quite frankly, it's redundant. All right, and then we're going to create a new Meterpreter listener, and I haven't quite explained why we're doing that in the video yet. We have talked about it in class, but let's just follow along and use listener, Meterpreter, and let's see the options. This has quite a bit less in the way of configuration requirements. We simply need to set the name and the port and the host IP for staging. And I'm going to set the port to 9,000 and set the host to using TLS. I believe we can just use this. Let's go ahead and check. Sure enough, we can just enter our host name and it will automatically append the correct port based on our settings. Execute. And then if we run a listeners again, we will see it actually appended the one for us because I forgot to change the name. Thanks, Armjoy. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete that one because it is redundant. And then you'll see that these are configured pretty much the same way, but as we did, but we have slightly different ports. The only reason I didn't delete them and recreate them is I didn't want to have to create new stagers for it. So let's go ahead and check out the options for this. And one of the options is to use stager. Before we do that, I'm just going to show you another pretty cool feature or function right here called launcher. So if you start typing that, hit tab, and then keep hitting tab, you'll see the options for launcher. What launcher does is it gives you a very quick and easy stager command. So let's go ahead and create a PowerShell one. And it's going to say, what do you want to create? Let's do the PowerShell stager for our HTTP listener. Do we need any more options? No. Okay, so we can hit enter. And just like that, we have our PowerShell command to get a listener or an agent set up and running on a host. So if we were just copy this text and run that on a Windows host, we should get an agent check-in. Another way of creating a stager is the use stager module. And here are all the different options. We have the opportunity to build multi-platform, Windows, OS X, and just for the sake of trying it out, let's try a Windows, I don't think I've done this one, C# exe, and then run an info. We're going to set the listener to be our HTTP, and we're going to set our out file to var www html, and we're going to call it this http C#.exe. Oh, no, it wants it to be src. I think that's the bare minimum. Looks good. You can see there's a little bit of a formatting issue with some of the text here, but one of the other things you'll notice on this is this user agent. This is probably another thing that the defensive tools will flag on. If you're using a default user agent, if it can inspect your traffic and see that, it'll probably profile it as an Empire shell, which is just more probability of getting caught. So another thing that you'll want to rotate to have more advanced stealth capabilities. So execute this, and we will be able to see that it's been written here. So I'm going to create a new pane within tmux by hitting my control character and then the % key, and we'll get a new pane over here, and then we're just going to cd over to var www HTML. And this is a pretty common directory on web servers. This is typically where you'll keep your web files, things that are served by your web server. And so you'll see in here that I've got a bunch of other stagers already. I've got a VBS, a .bat, and some other fun things. Unfortunately, I don't see that file that we just created. Oh, and this is why. I have too many wwws over here. So let's go up a directory, and then up a directory, and then let's just see if we can see what's in here. Whoops. Probably way more complicated than we needed to do for the video. Okay, so what this is building is a stager that you can then compile in Visual Studio to build yourself a compatible exe, and then yeah, it's kind of hard to see in Vim because it's all in one line. But basically what this is saying is create a program where the main function creates this string called stager and encodes and basically just runs the stager. But the advantage is you don't even need PowerShell for this. It just runs this command. So it's a little bit more stealthy. Now, that's probably a little bit more complex than you guys really need. So let's go back and just build a very basic one. So we'll go back to use listener, and that's not available here, as you'll see. If we hit the question mark, see that's not available. So we need to go back to main, use listener, also not available. As you'll see, hitting tab, not there. So let's go to the listeners menu, see if we can find it there. Sure enough, use listener. And again, we're going to want to hit tab to see what our options are. I'm sorry, use stager. Use stager. The benefit of using tab, you get to be reminded what you're doing wrong. And we're going to go with a Windows and launcher. And let's do a bat file. That seems pretty easy. Info. Just want to clean this up over here. I'm going to exit out of here. And everything looks pretty good here. We just need to change the out file to that var www, correct number this time. Actually, let's make it the wrong one again. That way you can see a little bit more simply. And then we're going to do a launcher.bat. Okay. Of course. Set out file. Okay. that looks good. We're not obfuscating. I don't recommend that, but it's going to be on the scope to get into that. Just want to get this working for you. And make sure we have our listener set, which we don't. Now we can go back there and see, make sure that all the requireds are filled out, and then execute. So let's create ourselves another pane, cd var too many W's, HTML, and then we'll see our old one, the one that we would have to compile. Let's just go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so we just got the launcher.bat, and we can check that out with Vim. And this is kind of similar to what you are familiar with. We've got this big, long PowerShell command that, that runs when we execute this. So this is the file you essentially run to get your agent working. And it's also the same command that you were probably familiar with from running this PowerShell HTTP. You can kind of see the similarities here. Pretty much the same command, but the bat file on the right does have a little bit of additional commands. Oops. Does have a few additional commands just to make it a compatible bat file. Anyway, kind of beyond the scope of explaining what all that stuff means, but basically that's your batch file. All right, so next step is testing this out. So I'm going to bring up a virtual machine. And I've got a Windows 7 VM over here. And one of the benefits to sticking these launchers in your web server directory is if you browse to the web server, you can access this one. So I'm going to remove that too many W's directory. Whoops. And nope, too much. And just show you that in my www directory, I've got a few different things, but the most important one is going to be this launcher.vbs or launcher.bat. And then let's go back over to this Windows VM. I'll just show you that I don't have any agents currently registered. So let's go to bits. Yeah, I've already tested this. Well, that's the first thing we have to figure out is why I don't have internet. I may have locked this down on the upstream. All right, we're going to pause here while I go figure out what I've how I've locked it down.